Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Global Connections Television is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We would invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with any type of media outlet, be it a PBS station, community access television station, or any other type, we would encourage you to go to download our programs because Global Connections Television is provided free of charge as a public service to help us better understand international issues. And of course, Global Connections is not just limited to media outlets. If you're involved with an educational institution, be it a university or even a middle school, or you have a website and you'd like to share our programs, please feel free to do so because we want to help educate and inform people in the United States and around the world about these international issues and how they impact our lives. Today we're focusing on a very interesting project that was helped launch by a Rotary Club in North Carolina to help young people prepare for the 21st century in a wide range of areas such as science and mathematics. My guest today is an expert on this project and on the Rotary Clubs. My guest today is Dr. Michael Waters. Dr. Mike Waters is Rotary Foundation Chair and Board Member of the Rotary Club of Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. Mike, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you so much, Bill.
We're
nice
going
to be here.
We're going to jump into your program in just a minute, but let's talk a little bit about you. You retired. What did you do before you retired?
Well, I had about 29 years in the Environmental Protection Agency and director position for genetic toxicology primarily. I had another 6 years with the NIH,
National Institutes for Health.
National Institutes of Health, specifically National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences, which is in RTP. That's the only part actually is off the Bethesda campus. There I was responsible for development of a toxicogenomics database, which is a great opportunity for me towards the end of my career. And then after that, I had another 6 years in the private sector as a chief scientific officer for a company.
Oh, very good. Very diverse, interesting background.
Kind of rode the wave.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You mentioned Research Triangle Park. I mentioned it too. We've probably heard a lot about it. What, very briefly, what is the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina?
Well, it's about a 7,000 acre industrial research park. Its primary
It's an incubator, is it not?
Yeah, it's an incubator, but I was starting to say, I think research and entrepreneurship now is the main focus of the park. Going forward, we're trying to embrace the evolution of the thinking about education, and really that is our focus as the Rotary Club. So youth, entrepreneurship, education, primary focus.
Yeah, that it's a massive operation. It's huge and so very important too, as far as
established almost 60 years ago. Next year will be the 60th
Has it been
anniversary.
That long?
Yeah.
My goodness, yeah. Well, let's drop down from RTP down to your Rotary Club. Let's talk a little bit about Rotary. You and I are both Rotarians. Confess up front.
All right.
And what is Rotary International? And then tell me about your club.
Well, Rotary International was founded in 1905 by Paul Harris. It's an international service club promoting ethics, goodwill, service. Its main focus is international in terms of Rotary International. The local clubs have local service projects, and this, what we're going to talk about, is one of the local service projects.
Yeah, and of course, Rotary International now is one of the largest, if not the largest, service club in the world. It was one of the first. As you mentioned, it started in 1905, and today it still has 1.2 million
Right, and I understand
members.
35,000 clubs approximately.
35,000 around in over 200 countries and territories around the world. And of course, Rotarians are involved in international projects, clean water projects. They're involved in working with the United Nations, with the UN Children's Fund, the UN World Health Organization, on the Polio Plus program. Of course, Rotarians are involved in many community projects. They network with the Salvation Army, for example, to help raise funds around Christmas time. They're involved in club service projects, and just on across the vocational projects with students. So there's a little bit of something for everybody in Rotary if they're interested in joining. So now your Rotary Club, what project did you pick up on, the STEAM project?
Yeah, the STEAM project, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, came about as a result of, as I alluded to earlier, our focus on youth entrepreneurship and education as our local club focus. We were looking for a project that would bring our club together and that would promote these three attributes of our interest. So in doing that, what we were most interested in was to try to create one event that would enable all of us to be a part of it and to come together and focus on these three attributes. So that having been said, we started a process where we discussed how we might go forward, and we had ideas presented by club members. So one of our club members is actually director of a high school there in Research Triangle Park, a STEM high school, and that started us down the road of thinking about STEM or possibly STEAM. As we embraced that, we moved to another idea that another club member had, and that was to basically tell his grandchildren, in his case, what his company did. It's an animal diagnostics company. He was interested in doing that and promoting entrepreneurship. Basically, we have a lot of companies in the RTP area that are engaged in amazing technologies, all sorts of things that are interesting to many different people and obviously have a lot to do with the future. So we're talking about, in this discussion, I think, communities of the future going forward, planning for the future. A third area that another club member came up with was he thought we really needed to honor the past, present, and the future of RTP. So the past, in his judgment, one way to honor the past would be to pick about 5 members of the scientific community in RTP that had basically had fantastic careers and done amazing things. And so that idea went forward. And then we finally thought that in the celebration that would be held at the end of the event, that we would bring all this together, and that was done at the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. So we actually had 4 events under STEAM, and the changing the world was the objective that the young people would be embracing. So that is the basic beginning of the idea of the STEAM Changing the World project, and it turned out to be 4 separate events.
And we've got a short video, about a minute or so, of a very interesting overview of why it's important to help train young people. Let's go to the video and we'll come back.
Sure.
At RTI International, we believe in delivering the promise of science. It's a promise we work every day to keep, because we know that science makes a difference. Science can solve some of the world's most difficult problems. Through our work in maternal and newborn health and for abused children, we provide hope for safer and stronger families. We also help people succeed, whether they struggle with addiction or need education or training to build a better life. Our data analytics and mobile technologies help us create safer streets for communities and for those who protect them. We're also innovating new tools and techniques for disaster preparedness and crisis management. And we're working towards a healthier future for societies dealing with HIV and other epidemics, helping the elderly get the care they need, and providing a voice for those who suffer silently with mental illness. Our global reach allows us to focus on some of the planet's biggest challenges. We dedicate ourselves every day to improving the air we breathe and ensuring that sanitation and waste management are seen as critical human needs. Because we recognize humanity's impact on this world, we work to slow climate change and to provide security for our planet's food sources. We know there are solutions out there to afflictions like cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, and we're supporting efforts to find them.
Mike, that was very interesting, and I think it really highlights how important it is to work with young people, because we're in a rapidly changing technological environment today. It's much faster than what it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago, and they have to be prepared. They have to be multi-dimensional to some degree. How did you work with these students? What types of courses did you have, or not courses per se, but presentations, programs, that type of thing? How did you select the students to participate?
So I mentioned the director of the Research Triangle High School. She had already, fortunately for us, because this was our first year of our event, fortunately for us, had already started taking her students to some of the major businesses in Research Triangle Park. They do this routinely, but they did this for her several years in previous years, and for us, they were able to bring this together as part of a larger effort, which also demonstrated to the public through public tours what was going on. So we had about 250 students from Research Triangle High School. We went to a middle school and engaged actually the Durham Public School System to allow a middle school group to have a training exercise, which was actually funded by Red Hat, a company in Raleigh, North Carolina. That training exercise involved bringing together two groups of students, one that would create a transmitter, the other that would create a receiver, and they would be able to communicate. So it was a lesson in new technology based on LED lighting, transfer of the signal through the lighting, but it provided an opportunity for kids who had never had that kind of an exposure to have a new exposure. So we had the combination of the visits to the companies, major companies with amazing technologies, and also the hands-on learning experience that the students were engaged in, and that was an entire morning. So that second part was another 250 students, so a total of about 500 students involved.
Now, this is obviously in the early stages,
yes.
But do you see this program as something that could be a model, a paradigm for other folks around the United States and around the world too, not just in this country? I know you're in a very high-tech area,
right.
And it's, I would assume, I may be wrong on this, that it's a little easier to pull it off in that kind of an area. But for folks in other areas of the country and in other countries, is this a model that they might want to look at?
Well, it's interesting. The reason that this idea came to mind was because of the fact that I visited a small community in eastern North Carolina, two parts. I want to talk about two parts there, but the eastern North Carolina community was a sailing community, a boating community.
So, like yachting, sailboats?
I happen to be a sailor, and I was excited to go there and buy some boat parts and a few things like that. I didn't know that it was a Rotary-sponsored event. When I got there, I was asked to pay $5, and the guy had his Rotary shirt on, and I said, well, why is this a Rotary-sponsored event? He said, well, we're trying to promote our community, the sailing community, and this is what we do in this town. So this gave me the idea that, you know, a small community of 5,000, and I happen to live in a small community of 5,000 in Hillsborough, North Carolina, a small community taking into account what its businesses are, what its professionals are, and also the fact that the Rotary clubs represent community representation of business professionals, of all sorts of organizations that come together to try to do these service projects that you talked about. And so that aspect, plus the second part, which had to do with Rick Smyer, my good friend and colleague from Davidson 50 years ago. Rick took us to another community through Communities of the Future, his organization, and this group of 50-year-old Davidson graduates, Davidson class of '64, to a textile and furniture making community in North Carolina. And that community was one in which it really needed to modernize. And so looking at those two examples and thinking in terms of, well, gosh, we're in RTP, we have all this technology, we have the mission that we want to educate young people, we've got a great opportunity. But if it can be done around whatever the community's focus is, then it would be certainly possible for us to do it. So we set about thinking about how Research Triangle Park could represent itself as a community. And basically, to answer your question, believe that almost any community could focus on whatever it is that they do and be equally successful. So it has to be, I think, oriented towards a service to the community, and that's where Rotary comes in.
Yes. So look at what your strengths are and take a look at that.
Exactly.
Go with those and move forward. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. And you mentioned Rick Smyer. Rick's been on our show twice now, at talking about his book, Communities of the Future, and also talking about the narrative, launching the 21st century narrative. And so for our viewers who are interested in this, they can go and find Rick in a couple other spots on in the video gallery. So now, how do you plan to merge, or not merge, but to coordinate and cooperate and network with the communities of the future in the future?
Right. Well, you're probably aware of, since I think you're actually involved in unleashing a 21st century narrative, Rick and several others, 12 in fact, others have proposed to do several projects. This project that we're talking about, the Rotary-based STEAM project, is an example. And what we hope going forward that it might become is that if we can engage other Rotary clubs, we would be able to have them, as I sort of alluded to in the previous answer, work towards what it is that their community needs, what it is that they could do for their community, and using the potential of Rotary, potentially expand that on a larger scale. If it really is something that is appealing as an example, as a model, as you alluded to, then I think we could use this example profitably going forward in other communities. And that's really what Rick wants to do, to use these kinds of projects to begin to change the future for the better.
Exactly. And of course, Rotary has a vast network, we mentioned earlier, with 35,000 clubs, 1.2 million Rotarians. And in many communities, the Rotary Club is the economic engine. They are driving economic development, international trade, job creation, things like that. Not to say that they're by themselves, not saying that, but they have
members are driving.
Exactly. And even in some communities, I know one in particular in Kentucky, that a large number of the jobs that came into this community were really there because of the local Rotary Club and the individual members and them working together. So there's a great opportunity there to, if the Rotary Club is interested and the Rotarians are interested, to build upon this. So that how do you plan to reach out to these Rotarians?
Well, I think the idea that comes to mind is to start locally in the district, to talk to other clubs within the district about what we have done, which is close to them geographically. There is a lot of interchange between clubs now, so whatever one club is pursuing, it generally goes and tells the other club all about it, and maybe they sell us poinsettias at Christmas or something, but which happens. But there are all kinds of service projects that come out of that. So the money that you make from a project like STEAM Changing the World, which is really not set up to make money, but to actually promote education and entrepreneurship and youth, those projects in the different clubs can be complementary. So what we would hope is that by pursuing an area, such as the RTP area, which is actually Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill and beyond, where technology is a major attribute of the economy, the engine that drives the community forward, and entrepreneurship is the closely related aspect, that we will be able to interest these clubs in working with us to bring this about in the park, maybe evolving from STEAM. But as we think about other parts, such as that furniture manufacturing or textile manufacturing area that is now changing, again, because of new technology, that we will be able to pick community areas of this sort and amalgamate clubs that have common interest in growing their region and changing their region and looking to the future for their region. And so I think that's where unleashing a 21st century narrative and going forward with communities of the future type activities ties in with what we're doing. So it hopefully would be a combination of Rotary and organizations like those that I just mentioned that would come together and work on these projects. I'm not sure Rotary can do it all by itself, but what we hope is some of the ideas that are emerging will help Rotary think a little bit differently about how it could approach doing projects. And I think that's really kind of what we hope that will happen.
And so many Rotary clubs are looking to network and to cooperate and coordinate with other groups, realizing that they need to. And while we're talking about Rotary, we wound up talking about it quite a bit, but if any of our viewers are interested in Rotary, they can go to rotary.org and get more information about some of the projects that are out there in the Rotary world. But no, I think there's a great opportunity for Rotarians to look at this, and they're always looking for good projects. Every club I've ever been involved with, and been around or talked to, they always want to see some type of good project in their community or internationally.
Right. And I think another aspect of that, that whole Rotary focus that kind of relates to what we tried to do with STEAM is that if you think about it, the way I described STEAM, we were trying to educate youth. We were trying to look at the present to promote entrepreneurship. We were trying to honor the past with these senior investigators that have done such wonderful things with their careers. Rotary is aging, just like a lot of organizations that do service are aging. And so we need to bring the youth in. We need to get the focus on youth, and we need to have young Rotary members. So you mentioned that, Rotary does things with other organizations. We build houses with Habitat for Humanity. Sure. But not all of us. Some of us are getting a little older to be building houses, although I gather you were still cleaning your roof the other day.
Still cleaning gutters.
Cleaning gutters.
Right.
But I mean, I think these kinds of things need to be thought about in terms of what Rotary can be going forward. Maybe it needs to change. Maybe it needs to, revamp some of its thinking.
It certainly does, and it's doing that. As a matter of fact, I was just at a Rotary conference in Montgomery, Alabama, a Zone Institute, and that's exactly what they were talking about, bringing in more youth. And of course, Rotary has the Interact program for high school students and the Rotaract program for college students. And so that is an opportunity in communities where they're active. And of course, it would be great if every community had an Interact and Rotaract club. We
just to pick up on that, which was an effort to grow our membership, we actually gave reduced price memberships to college students from the local universities and brought them into the club. And they were that kind of a student, BME student, biomedical engineering student, actually participated in the training efforts that we described earlier in this program for STEAM. So, that I think Rotary really can do a lot. And of course, it's very difficult to make a broad generalization, but I would imagine every service club, Lions, there are about 1.1 million Lions around the world. Kiwanis, I'm sure they're all dealing with the same challenges. Absolutely.
And they're all looking to see how they can bring youth in and to get more people involved in the community, because they can make a tremendous difference. We see that what happened with the Polio Plus program that Rotary launched back in 1985 and then brought the United Nations World Health Organization in, the UN Children's Fund into it, the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, and then ultimately the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we're just on the brink of eliminating polio. This is the largest international health program ever undertaken in the world, and it's going to save us, we in the United States, about $300 million a year in taxes that we won't have to spend on polio programs, and it'll save the taxpayers of the world $1.5 billion per year.
Amazing.
When this is accomplished. And not only to mention that, but the best part is so many thousands of lives, over 50,000 lives will be saved every year when you eliminate that scourge of polio.
Yeah, and I remember polio when I was growing up as a kid.
Sure, with the iron lung.
Worrying about going to a swimming pool and contracting
Exactly,
polio.
Yes, right. Well, Mike, as you look down the road, what do you see as the biggest challenge to pulling all this together and accomplishing your goal?
Well, you know, it was a challenge raising the funds the first go around. We had some wonderful participation of major companies, and so I was going to allude to the fact that the youth that are being educated and trained are needed by these companies. That is part of their requirement. They have to have an educated workforce, especially in high-tech companies. I think a challenge is convincing all of the companies that we would like to have be involved in this, that it would be to their benefit to become a part of it. We had, in fact, over 32 companies and organizations that came and worked with us on STEAM, which was pretty amazing for the first year. I think that the challenge of bringing that together, I think we had some surprising things happened to us with regard to entrepreneurship. We didn't understand that some companies couldn't make claims about what their technology would do, and they had to be very careful of that, so they were reluctant to talk too much about it. But those were minor things, and they were challenges, and they were things that we had to overcome. But those are some examples of the kinds of things.
Exactly. Minor in comparison, but very important to take care of. And that's important. And I want to mention, too, we hear so much about the STEM program, the science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but you added the arts, and congratulations on that. But unfortunately, we just run out of time. But Mike Waters, I want to thank you so very much for
welcome.
a very interesting and a very informative program.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.